Hi, I'm Steve. You can call me Steve. With a viral pandemic raging across the globe, there's been a sudden spike in demand for disinfectant and hand sanitizer. Hygiene and disinfection are good ways to prevent disease transmission, and given how vicious this virus is, preventing its transmission is now one of the most important things in the world. Disinfection kills infectious bacteria and viruses. Those are different beasties. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. They're the smallest possible unit of life. They've got all the qualities necessary to be considered alive. They eat, excrete, respire, and reproduce. They're a collection of biological hardware enclosed by an envelope of fatty molecules, or a membrane. You're covered with them right now, inside and out, and that's okay. I mentioned in my bacteria video why they're important for your health. Viruses, on the other hand, are in a weird, hard-to-classify state between alive and not alive. They're a core of genetic material coated in protein, and some of the fancier ones have a membrane over top of that, similar to the membrane on bacteria. They don't eat, excrete, or respire, and they can only reproduce by hijacking the machinery of a cell. In that respect, they act very much like computer viruses, which is why the computer version was named after them. A computer virus is a piece of programming that doesn't really do much until it infects a computer, at which point some types make copies of themselves and email those copies to everyone in your email's address book. Bacteria and viruses are quite different, and more sophisticated forms of chemical warfare, like drugs or other pharmaceuticals, have to be tailored to each one. You've probably heard that antibiotics work on bacteria but not on viruses. Disinfectants, on the other hand, are emphatically unsophisticated forms of chemical warfare, achieving with indiscriminate brute force what antibiotics achieve with precision and finesse. It's a sledgehammer versus scalpel comparison. There are a bunch of different types of sledgehammer, though. Alcohol is a popular option because it's cheap, effective, plentiful, and a mild enough sledgehammer that you can put it on your hands without coming to harm, although it will helpfully locate any paper cuts you might be unaware of. The two most commonly used are rubbing alcohol, also called isopropanol, and ethanol. Rubbing alcohol is named specifically for its use as a disinfectant. You rub it on things you want to make sterile. Ethanol is the only type of alcohol we can drink safely, and that's if you consider safe to include things like cirrhosis of the liver. For this reason, ethanol used for disinfection has a bitterant added to it, so that it tastes too foul to drink, because it's apparently not foul enough on its own. Alcohols work by causing proteins to clump together. In viruses, this has the effect of dismembering that protective coat and scattering the genetic material to the point where it ceases to be a coherent organism. This is obviously fatal, if you can apply that word to something we're not sure is alive in the first place. While I said that bacteria are coated in a membrane of fatty acids, that membrane also has a collection of proteins protruding through it, serving a wide variety of functions. When alcohol clumpifies these, it rips holes in the membrane where those proteins used to be, shredding the bacterium and spilling it everywhere. Once again, fatal. Another popular option is bleach. Bleach, or hypochlorite, is what you get when you dissolve chlorine gas in water. This is a very reactive chemical, and the chemistry is not subtle or elegant. It's a vicious dismemberment of anything it comes in contact with, so you definitely don't want to use this as a hand sanitizer. While it does disrupt some of the biological processes the bacteria need to live, by the time the bleach has chewed its way to the inside of the cell, it's more or less a coup de grace. UV irradiation is another good option. UV, or ultraviolet, is high-energy light that destroys and disrupts the cellular machinery and genetic material, the latter affecting both bacteria and viruses. It also creates radicals, which are vicious chemicals that make bleach look like water. This 1-2 punch leaves very few survivors. Finally, there's good old-fashioned soap and water. In addition to just generally making things clean, soap actively disrupts those membranes I mentioned earlier. Soap is composed of molecules with a water-loving and a water-hating end, and the membranes are composed of molecules with a water-loving and a water-hating end. Some of the molecules from the membranes run off with the soap molecules and start a new life together, leaving gaping holes in the membrane where they used to be. Soap's a homewrecker. That's disinfection. Figuring out how to prevent infection was a huge turning point in the history of public health, and marked the point where people stopped routinely dying of horrible diseases in huge numbers. You don't hear about typhus, dysentery, or cholera epidemics anymore because we know enough to keep clean. This knowledge means the current pandemic should be easily mitigated, unless certain political factions do everything they can to sabotage mitigation efforts. Thanks for watching. I've been Steve. P.S. Wear a mask.